So today we're going to be talking about why it is a narcissist is very happy that you might become fixated on trying to convince other people that they are a narcissist. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell. This way, every time I upload a new video, you dear one will be the first to know. My intention on this channel is to raise your awareness about narcissism, to raise your awareness about your own personal codependency traits, so that you can discern healthy behavior from unhealthy behavior in yourself and others. If you are not someone who is a narcissist per se, then you are someone who will appreciate information such as this. If you are someone who is more codependent, if you are an empath that lacks boundaries, if you are someone who moves about in the world feeling like it is your obligation or responsibility to fix and or heal people, and you tend to attract people in your life who take advantage of you and exploit your empathy and exploit your generosity, then this information will prove very beneficial for you. So today we're talking about why it is someone who is highly narcissistic would want you to get stuck in the trap of trying to convince other people that they are in fact narcissists. Very interesting. When you are involved with a narcissist, it is often a very lonely, bewildering experience because you are inside a world that no one else sees. There are terrible toxic things happening behind closed doors that narcissists absolutely know that they cannot exhibit in front of other people. You might have a pastor that's a narcissist who is highly toxic to his daughters and sons and wife, and yet in front of the congregation, he is revered. Everybody wants to know this person. Everybody wants to break bread with this person. Yet the family is bewildered by this dichotomy that this is not who my father really is. And it is very, like I said, bewildering when you are inside the fishbowl and you know that the person that you're stuck in the fishbowl with is a shark. But yet everybody outside the fishbowl is looking in thinking, this person's this little minnow, this person is kind, this person is generous, this person is empathic, this person has amazing qualities, and yet you're stuck in the fishbowl with the shark. When you're dealing with a narcissist, what they do is they rely on this experience of others. They love bomb people on the outside. They seem to be very fawning over people on the outside. And they do things for other people and they get other people to admire them, and they can rely on this. They can rely on this outer experience to justify why they are toxic towards you, why they have no empathy towards you. And if you're not careful, and I think most of us end up in this situation where we're confused by what we're experiencing on the inside of the fishbowl, and it's normal, right? So all of us look to the outer world for some sense of semblance to make sense out of how we feel. Our human mind always needs to ask the question, why? Unfortunately, when you're dealing with someone who has high narcissistic traits, you're dealing with someone who does not take accountability. This person is grandiose. They have an inflated sense of self. They generally think that they're better looking, more important, more intelligent than other people, that their opinion trumps your opinion, that their feelings are more important than your feelings. If you're dealing with someone who is a covert, vulnerable narcissist, this is someone who gets insulted very quickly. This is someone who, in a crowd, has a problem with just about anyone. And if this person is not able to manipulate how other people see them, and let's say you're in a room with someone who is a covert, vulnerable narcissist, and they expect the person across the room to make them feel good about themselves. Let's say they just turn their head as the covert narcissist is looking in their direction. A covert narcissist will take that very personally, get defensive, create a whole story in their head, and get actually angry at this person who they feel slighted them. And there was no slight. Maybe the person across the room didn't even see them. This is just one incident. So if you're dealing with someone who has who is a covert narcissist, this is somebody who is wreaking havoc wherever they go. If you are the child of a covert narcissist, you are listening to someone who is always complaining, who always feels like a victim, and who turns situations around and is very convincing that the children have upset them, or the wife has upset them, or the husband has upset them. It's always someone else's fault because of why this person can't keep it together. And so it's very easy to insult them. They are highly sensitive to criticism. This is someone who may even seem vulnerable. This is someone who tells you how they feel. But what you might not pay attention to is how often they create drama in their life. And so if you love this person, your nose is barely above the waterline. This is someone who is never happy and who just insists that everybody else is responsible for why they are unhappy. No introspection whatsoever. Always someone else's fault. When you're dealing with someone who is more grandiose, it's a little bit more obvious to see. So you might see outbursts of anger. You might see the need for admiration. You might see this sense that they put you down if you don't admire them like the neighbors do. The minute you say, there's some hypocrisy in the way that you treat me and the children versus how you treat the congregation, or there's some hypocrisy as to how you treat people in the office versus how you treat the children and I, or how you treat your mother, or how you treat your father, they will become highly activated, maybe dismissive. They will use this as an excuse to betray you. And so these are the traits of a more grandiose narcissist. They're more extroverted and they have more of an obvious need for admiration. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be somebody who helps other people, but when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing with somebody who overtly, at least, seems like they want to help people, but they're not doing it for the person. They're doing it for the accolades. They're doing it for the power. They're doing it for the prestige. They're not doing it to help a community of people. I often get that question on my YouTube channel. Is this person a grandiose narcissist because they are doing this thing? And it all comes down to, what is the intention of the person who is doing this thing? So the person who is out there as a missionary, are they a missionary because they want to actually help people who are in tough situations? Or are they a missionary because they get to talk about being a missionary on social media? Are they a missionary because of the status it brings them, because of the people that they meet? And that is really how we're able to discern whether or not we're dealing with someone who is authentic, altruistic, and who has the intention of helping other people, or we're dealing with someone who is doing what they're doing to dominate for a sense of power, because then it's all about them. It's all about their narcissism. And so you can see how when we're talking about someone who is narcissistic, it's really a spectrum of traits. It does help us to recognize what these traits are and to flush out how it might show up. Because oftentimes people who are in relationships with narcissists are very confused. They are emptied out, they're hollowed out, they're exhausted. They have tons of cognitive dissonance. They're questioning themselves. Lots of times they're sick and physically ill, tremendous anxiety. They start to develop cognitive dissonance. They have brain fog. They have stomach issues. Hard for them to get out of bed in the morning. Having issues with the children. If you've lived with a narcissist for any length of time, your body starts to revolt on itself because you've been living with someone who has gaslit you, who has judged you, who has used intermittent validation to keep you on the hook, threatened to abandon you, and then will turn the kids against you. Look at your mother, she can't get out of bed. Look at your father, he's pathetic, all he does is drink. We might drink because we're trying to deal with the anxiety of living with someone who is impossible to please, or we have to walk around on eggshells around. I'm not condoning using alcohol to excess, but my point is, it's not uncommon to be someone who self-medicates, who lives with someone who is highly narcissistic. It's not uncommon for someone who lives with someone who is highly narcissistic to become depressed, to become anxious, to lose themselves, and to really almost completely lose the self and detach from the self and live in a world of how do I please this person, and or how do I avoid making this person upset. So we are detached from the self completely. Now, when we're talking about and fleshing out narcissistic traits, it's important to recognize how those traits show up in other people, but also the consequences of those traits on people who love them, because it might be the only way that you're able to figure out what you're dealing with. One of the common traits that I see in my online coaching programs, in my one-to-one personal coaching, is that people who are in experiences and relationships with narcissists can get tripped up when the veil is removed from their eyes and they start figuring out who they're dealing with. And suddenly the fishbowl experience makes sense. They are swimming with a shark, but yet their children, their mother, their father still see this person as a tadpole. The person who is the main source of narcissistic supply, when they start to awaken, is seeing things very differently than the rest of the world. So imagine being in a fishbowl with a shark and knowing that the people that you love the most, who are closest to you, all believe the shark is actually a tadpole, or they all believe the shark is a minnow, or they all believe that the shark is a dolphin. Imagining how maddening that is to be in the fishbowl with a shark that knows that you know that he or she is a shark, and they also know that the other people in the fishbowl think they're a minnow, think that they're a dolphin, think they're a turtle, right? Think there's some innocuous being in this fishbowl with them that they don't have to be afraid of. Now imagine looking outside the fishbowl. Now imagine being that person who knows, I've been swimming with a shark, but my kids don't know he or she is a shark. My parents don't know this person's a shark. I didn't even know this person was a shark. Imagine how maddening that is to be in the fishbowl with that person. And now imagine looking outside of the fishbowl. Think about the congregation. Think about where your spouse works. Think about where your friend, your narcissistic friend, works. Maybe you work with your friend who is highly narcissistic. Think about how they schmooze everyone that you know, everywhere that they go. Suddenly you're someone who recognizes, I've been sleeping with the enemy. I've been having coffee with the enemy. I've been going on vacation with the enemy. All of us have been drinking the Kool-Aid, and I'm the only person, as far as I can tell, that knows what I'm dealing with. That is a maddening experience, and it can leave you feeling very topsy-turvy, very insecure. You don't have your sea legs yet. You're still coming out of the fog. You didn't even know you were in a fog. And as you move forward, the natural response is to reach out to your children, adult children hopefully, reach out to your in-laws, reach out to people that you love, even maybe your own sister, your own brother, your mother and father, your best friend. The natural response is to want to get validated from the external world that your reality of the shark is actually the reality. Because when you're alone in this perception, you don't trust anything. You feel so insecure, like you can't eat, you can't sleep, your stomach's upset, you can't think. I remember going through this experience, I remember shaking, like I was just so nervous, I was just so rattled. And in my situation, when I realized how my codependency had played into this, how my lack of personal boundaries, how my propensity to subjugate is just as a norm, to think that it was my responsibility to pay attention to everyone else's needs and to not have a need, and to think and to be brainwashed and programmed and conditioned to think that is the way. So when I started coming out of the fog, not only was I aware that, wow, this is someone who is wired to not hear me. This is someone who really wants to dominate the relationship through stonewalling, through passive aggressiveness, through just not having conversations. I am not heard in this relationship. No wonder I'm so angry. But another layer for me personally was I was a codependent female who had been brainwashed by a codependent female. My mother was a codependent wife. My mother was someone who lived her life subjugating her needs for the sake of her husband. I was also someone who my mother emotionally, psychologically exploited. And so when I, as a woman, and I get it now, but when I, as a little girl, and even as a young woman, a teenager, adolescent, Anytime I broke out of the shell, the subjugating shell, and I said, I think, I feel, I need, or want, my mother shut it down. And I get it. She was projecting onto me. So what she couldn't have, she wasn't able to allow her daughter to have. She wasn't evolved enough to recognize that she was trapped inside her own codependency, which was tied to being the adult child of two alcoholic parents. And in my opinion, my mother was a dry alcoholic. And so she was trapped inside of that paradigm, unaware that she was unaware. And like all wounded adult children do, they project unconsciously onto their children. If we're fortunate on the path as wounded adults ourselves who are now parents, we recognize our wounds and we do everything we can to retrain our brain to live in a different paradigm and to take accountability for our wounds. Not responsibility, but accountability. It's sort of like if I get shot in the leg by a neighbor, it's my responsibility and I need to be accountable for tending to the wound. I am not responsible for the wound, but it is my responsibility to be accountable for taking care of the wound. So that's the difference. When you are in a relationship with someone who is highly narcissistic and you're coming out of it, it is mind-bending because no one else sees it. I've gone through this a number of times in my life. When I began to understand my parents, I was alone in it. My siblings didn't see it. My neighbors didn't see it. My friends didn't even see it. It wasn't until much later that my friends were able to see the traits that I saw. There was a whole lifetime of me feeling very much alone. Like my family, we're not close. Like we hurt each other. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel warm and fuzzy. I don't feel a part of this community. I remember feeling like I was an alien from the time I was 7 years old. Like this just doesn't feel right. I didn't have the vocabulary, but my body knew something was wrong. My brain knew I'm not attached here. I'm very insecurely attached. This doesn't feel right. What I ended up doing as a little girl was fawning, trying to please my mother, trying to be good enough. I became perfectionistic. I ended up with an eating disorder, just trying to figure out how to connect with other people. And because love was conditional, my little mind assumed that there was something wrong with me. I was broken and I had to fix it. I had to fix it. And what made sense to me was, well, I'm not very thin. Maybe I should be thinner, or maybe I should get straight A's, or maybe my room should be really perfect. Maybe I should just be quiet. Always trying to figure out in search of how to fix this thing in me that was broken. And so I had that experience with my mother. Like no one else sees what I see. And there was a time in my early 20s where I got super invested in trying to convince my brother and my sister that my reality of my parents was my reality of my parents. And I so needed them to come on board. And it totally backfired in my face. When I was married for 12 years. And it took me quite a long time to sift through the dynamic between myself and my ex. In the beginning, I thought that it was me. For a very long time, I would berate myself. I'm just selfish. I'm not good enough. I'm not trying hard enough. It's me. This person's perfect. Everyone loves him. Why can't I just be happy? I fell into the narrative that was created in me when I was a child. My brain had been wired to think there was something wrong with me. When you're dealing with someone who is a covert narcissist, they exploit that in you. Eventually they figure out what your boo-boos are and they exploit it. So what I heard was, well, you've never been happy. That's why you can't be happy with me. And it made sense based on what I had been programmed to believe. Lisa's never happy. Much later, I figured out that our family had this thing called codependency. My father was narcissistic. My parents were adult children of alcoholics. They had control issues. They had problems with intimacy. My brother, my sister, and I were emotionally neglected. We were emotionally abandoned. We were gaslit as children. I wasn't crazy. Everything that I felt, my unhappiness, was valid. But when you're dealing with parents who are so unconscious, so below the veil of consciousness, who in their head think they're doing everything right, they tell you that you are the one with the problem. And so I married someone who had the same ideology, who had the same emotional energy, who had the same perception of themselves. I'm perfect. You're not perfect. You know that you're not perfect. And therefore you're the one with the problem. It was as far as my family's perfect. You know that your family's not perfect, which took me a while to figure out also. Oftentimes narcissists will tell you that their families are perfect. And that gives them the right to put you down when you're someone who is more authentic and comes to them and says, this is the reality of my family. You come to them vulnerable. You come to them trying to create intimacy. You come to them trying to explain who you are, and they store it in their arsenal and they use it against you later. So when you're complaining perhaps about their mother that's a little bit intrusive, the commentary is, well, there's nothing wrong with my family. You're the person who has a problem with their family. Your family's messed up, not my family. So it's used against you. It's very, very common for someone who is highly narcissistic to think that their family was perfect. You can get caught up, like I did, when I began to realize what I was dealing with, because what I wanted and needed at the time, when I was living above the veil and processing my experience inside this relationship and taking responsibility and accountability for my codependency and how I made everything worse, because I suppressed my feelings and I did my best to look like my marriage was perfect, even though I felt like a wreck inside. So of course, after a dozen years, when I start understanding, wait a minute, this is a very codependent narcissistic dynamic. I've lost myself. I am frustrated. I've got nothing left to give. I know that I look like the crazy person. I know that I'm complaining all the time and I look like the person that is impossible to please. But you don't understand, this is after a dozen years of trying to please someone who I could never be good enough for this person, who put me down, who gaslit me, was passive aggressive, who stonewalled me, and who was very resentful of me, who treated me differently behind closed doors in front. Nobody understood that. All they saw was 12 years, Lisa was done, she's got a mouth on her, she's the one with the problem. And I got stuck trying to explain to people, no, this is the dynamic. Now, what we have to be careful of as we're coming through this is that when you're dealing with someone who's highly narcissistic, that person knows that you want other people to know that they're a shark. What they do at that point is they start fawning. So if your husband, for instance, never had anything to do with the children, suddenly he has interest in the children. If your wife never spent any time with your daughter alone, suddenly she wants to take your daughter out for a manicure. Suddenly she wants to do mommy-daughter things. If you have a friend who never spent any time with your other friend, another friend, let's say a third friend, suddenly the friend that you now feel is narcissistic, that you've had a confrontation with, is suddenly super nice, super attentive, suddenly on time, and now fawning after other people in your group. This is when they raise the ante, they raise the bar, and they will play with your head in that space. And what you have to do, and I know it's very difficult, but you have to let go. You have to not allow a narcissist to wedge you into that spot where they are psychologically tormenting you with the truth. Now, when you open your eyes and you see that shark in the fishbowl, that shark's ammunition is that person wants everyone else in the fishbowl to know I'm a shark. What do? They morph into a kitten. Suddenly, the person who is highly narcissistic, where it would have been a little bit easier for you to call them out on something, suddenly those traits go into hiding. Suddenly, their mask has become thicker. Suddenly, they're fawning, they're acquiescing. On the surface, they're even subjugating to other people. And you want to scream. You want to pull your hair out because the people in your life are drinking the Kool-Aid. So let's say you have a narcissistic husband who refuses to spend time with your children. All of a sudden, he wants to take them on vacation. All of a sudden, he wants to pay for college tuition. All of a sudden, he wants to buy your son a car. And that's the kind of game that they play. So they will use narcissistic supply. They will use love bombing against you. And if you're not careful, you will get sucked into this paradigm, which is exactly what a narcissist wants you to do. It is so difficult to set boundaries around these experiences, but I encourage you to think about these ideas. I encourage you to understand that when you're living with a shark inside a fishbowl and you start awakening and you start to understand the dynamic that you're living with, the ammunition that they are using ends up becoming part of your soul. It's inside your head. They're destroying you from the inside out. They know that you want everyone else to know that they are dealing with the shark. And so what do they do to hurt you psychologically is they become kittens. They become butter in people's hands. And you know that they're doing it for show. You know that they're doing it to hurt you. You know that they're trying to get your children to think poorly of you by subjugating to your children, by people pleasing to your children. You know it's a game. You know it's a tactic, but the people in your life start to fall for it because the narcissist activates their narcissism. And so now if you're a parent who's setting boundaries, your children want nothing to do with you. If you're a friend who has boundaries, your friends are like, you know what, you're just too difficult. I know that I told you I was going to go to your house party on Saturday, but listen, so-and-so rented this boat. Sounds like it's going to be a good time, and you're a little ornery these days. I'm going on the boat. Meanwhile, the narcissist hates boating, never wanted to be around your friends or a lot of people, and yet suddenly when you have a fallout with them, this person now becomes what everybody else wanted them to be. And you know what they're doing. And they want you to be tormented by it. Not easy to do, dear ones. I get it. I learned the hard way. I fell on my face many times. I was angry at the people that I loved that couldn't see what I felt was right in front of their face. And that anger blinded me to the fact. The fact was that even I didn't see it. Even I didn't understand it. And it took me a while to figure it out. And I had to humble myself to allow this dynamic to play out until it all came full circle. And in my case, it took about 7 years for it to come full circle, but it came full circle. I had to let it go. I had to let my kids be activated. I had to let my kids feel that their father was doing the right thing by them. I had to let go of trying to control how they saw him. I let it all go. In the meantime, I focused on my own life. I found myself. I found hobbies. I started a company. I started 2 businesses, and I ended up writing books like in my spare time, meditating, journaling, taking care of myself, life coaching, just really, really embracing myself and embracing my mission in life, which was to help people find themselves after being in narcissistic relationships, helping people discover the true self after being brainwashed and having their brain trained to be codependent, to not have a sense of self. And so that's how I turned this very negative experience into a positive experience. And in time, it does work out. Because our energy is all about how we feel. And if I am stuck feeling tormented by a situation that I cannot control, then the shark wins, the narcissist wins. When I let go and say, I know that you want me to be stuck on the fact that nobody sees what I see. I know you want me to be stuck there, but guess what? I refuse to be stuck there. So you fawn, you subjugate, you spend your money on whoever you want to spend it on. You spend your time on whoever you want to spend it on. I'm not going to try to control something I can't control. I'm thankful I see you for who you are. I'm thankful I'm no longer in your web. I'm thankful that I am no longer shark bait. I am thankful that I am not your primary source of narcissistic supply. And if you can develop that mindset, and like I said, I know it's not easy. You have to wrestle your ego because your ego is going to naturally want to defend itself because it just feels like such an injustice. But I can tell you that this type of psychological warfare, someone who is highly narcissistic, they're built for it. And most people aren't. Most people will be drained by trying to have this type of a fight. And it's just not worth it. When you can take all of that energy and flow it towards something positive and plant those seeds. And in time, if you nurture those seeds, your life must provide you with abundance in many, many forms. You will have to have health. You will have to be vibrant. You will have to manifest success in your life. And success isn't just about money. As a matter of fact, abundance is about love. It's about health. It's about vitality. It's about doing what you love. Even if you live in a room somewhere in someone's home, but if you're doing what you want to do every day and you don't owe anybody anything and you have the job that you have that allows you to afford your bills, but you live in a space of freedom. You're not a source of narcissistic supply. You're not worrying about what your friends are thinking. You're not worrying about what your mother thinks. You're not worrying about what your father thinks. You wake up every day and you're focused on yourself, and you are working towards personal development, spiritual growth, and you are evolving yourself, and you're on the path to enlightenment and spiritual awakening. Dear one, you win. That's abundance. Never, ever, ever compare yourself to someone else. Judge your success by whether or not you are free mentally and emotionally and psychologically. That's how you judge success. And if you stay on the path in spite of what sharks are doing, success must be yours. Namaste, everybody. I bow to the love and the light that is absolutely in you. And if you need help flushing this out, please check out my website at www.lisaaromano.com. I'm offering my 12-week breakthrough coaching program 50% off in light of COVID. So many of us were stuck at home. So many of us were stuck at home with people with highly narcissistic, and we needed tools. So in light of COVID, in light of so many of us being stuck at home and working remotely, I'm offering my 12-week breakthrough coaching program, which is a brain retraining program, which will teach you how to think in a positive way about the self. So if you lack a sense of self, this program is for you. It will help you find yourself. I'll teach you how to process your emotions. You'll be able to stay in your own skin. You'll be able to say no, even if your knees are shaking in the beginning. But we're going to teach you systems and processes that allow you to stay in your own skin, say what you really think, say how you really feel, so that you are no longer stuck in these paradigms that don't serve you. Namaste, everybody. Until next time. Bye. If you love this content, don't forget to check out the next video, and you can go to my website and take the codependency quiz.